Working, kind of. Let's have a look a little. Perhaps I'll even put on YouTube and see if it's working there. So today we're learning about parallel structure. It's probably my favourite topic, and this is because I would argue that it's at the heart of all, let's say most rhetorical devices, if not all. And parallel structure is something that most English students never learnt about at school. I don't know why. It's actually one of the most important subjects. And it's something to help you speak, write and read clearly. It's all about clarity and balance. And it tries to show you ways that you can add clarity and balance to your speaking and your writing. Now, the most important thing about parallel structure is to recognise parts of speech, and I can't emphasise this enough. Parts of speech are really important. A lot of the time we don't learn about parts of speech again. Now, they do nowadays at primary school. They actually do study how to recognise verbs, nouns, adjectives, and that's actually really tricky, a lot harder than primary school level. They ought to do it at senior school as well, but they don't. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, please understand that this will not stay on YouTube. I said this yesterday, I'll say it again tomorrow. All of these videos will be stored on my website. Here is my website, skype-lessons.com. You need to go to my website to watch my lessons, and underneath every lesson there will be a PDF document, Google Docs it will be, so maybe not PDF, but there'll be a small exercise with answers. So if you come to my website, not only will you get online lessons, but also you will get exercises as well. So please leave YouTube. I've had enough of YouTube. They have disgusted me during this year, and they should disgust you as well. Now please, if you'd like to know more about parallel structure, buy my books. This one in particular, I mean. This one goes through parallel structure in one of the chapters, and it looks at parallel structure in literature. So it doesn't just look at the simple rules of parallel structure like we're going to go through. It also shows how it's used in rhetorical devices. And so if you want to start implementing the rules of parallel structure into your speaking and your writing, please buy my book. You can buy it on this website right now as a PDF, or you can buy it on Amazon if you prefer paperbacks. Now that's enough advertising, yeah, from the start of the lesson. But the good news is on my website there won't be any adverts. You get those on YouTube. Apart from adverts for my books, there will always be those. Now, parallel structure is important on three different occasions, okay? It's important in lists. Now, you get a list whenever you get fanboys, but you don't need fanboys because you could have a list with no and actually you get that a lot, and it's something called it's called asyndetic coordination when you have no conjunctions in a list, okay? It's got a name, asyndetic coordination or asyndeton. So you need to think about parallel structure when you're doing lists with or without fanboys, but the most obvious way to spot a list is to look out for an and, because there's usually an and or an or at the end, but there doesn't have to be. But when you're making lists, the idea is that you're actually making you're kind of comparing the items in the list, and when you do that, you need the items in the list to be of the same category. Now what we mean here is the same word type. Okay, so they all need to be nouns, or they all need to be verbs, or they all need to be prepositional phrases, and it sounds much better when you do that. It's much clearer for the listener when you do that. Okay, so in lists is number one when you think about parallel structure. Number two is in correlative conjunctions. Now, what the hell is a correlative conjunction? It's a two-part conjunction. It has two parts, such as both X and Y. That's a correlative conjunction, yeah? And it's a correlative conjunction because it joins the X to the Y. You say something like, both I and my wife hate seafood. Something like that. And you've got the I and my wife. And we must have similar things in the X and Y. And I'm sure you agree that we're both people, my wife and I, and so we are both similar. We can be compared. But it doesn't have to be a noun, or a pronoun like I. It could be a whole clause. You could say something like this. Well, you do see it rarely in a whole clause. Let me think. Well, you might see 2 plus infinitive verb phrases. You might see something like this. I want both to go to the shops and to have a coffee. Something like that. And you've got to go to the shops and to have a coffee. And you need 2 plus infinitive phrases on both sides for the elements to be in parallel. They must be in parallel. Because when you use a correlative conjunction, again, you're making a comparison between the X and the Y, really. So what are some other correlative conjunctions? Well, not only but also, yeah, not only X but also Y. This is a very common one. Okay, but there's also not X but Y, either X or Y, just as X, so too Y. Yeah, there are a lot of them. Please go online for a list and just type in correlative conjunctions and you'll find a list. Neither X nor Y is a very common one. So the neither, the either, the both, the not only but also, they're the main ones to look out for, but there are many others. My favourite one is X is to Y as W is to Z. That particular correlative conjunction I think is really complex, and so it's one of my favourites. But I have heard a few quotes with the X is to Y as W is to Z, and it always sounds really good and really intelligent. Anyway, that's quite a rare one. Lastly, we see parallel structure in comparisons, because when you compare two things, you've got to compare like with like. You can't compare a noun with a verb. They're totally different. They're doing different functions, and so they can't be compared. You can't compare an adjective with a, well, you can that, but with a, say, an adjective with a determiner. Yeah, it wouldn't make any sense. They're completely different. They function differently. Now, the thing to be aware with comparisons is that when we use comparisons very quickly, very briefly, we can often speak in a confusing manner. Have a look at this. I admire Tesla more than you. Now, think about how that could mean two different things, yeah? That could mean that I admire Tesla more than you admire Tesla. And to make it mean that, we need to tidy the sentence up, yeah? Because at the moment it's ambiguous, and ambiguity is a bad thing, yeah? Ambiguity is the opposite of clarity. And we want clarity. So if it can be understood in two different ways, that's not clarity. So we want to write it in two different ways. We want to write it either like this: I admire Tesla more than you do. And that makes it clear that I admire Tesla more than you might admire Tesla. But maybe I don't mean that. Maybe I mean I admire Tesla more than I admire you. Yeah? And if we want to write it like that, then we say I admire Tesla more than you, and that makes it really quite clear. Yeah, because it's I admire X more than Y. Yeah, I admire X more than Y. So the original one that we had, yeah, really can only mean this second one. I admire Tesla more than you. We need to add a do to make it clear that I admire Tesla more than you admire Tesla. Yeah, and so do be aware with comparisons that quite often you can use a very confusing, ambiguous comparison if you're not careful. And try and do it either like this or... Now, this is really the same because I admire Tesla more than you admire Tesla. And the do is an auxiliary verb standing in for admire Tesla. Yeah, and that's why this one is still in parallel. It's still equal. Okay, so there are some things to think about with parallel structure, but please, there are many other things you can think about, and there are other subtle nuances that a lot of you out there, because I know a lot of you out there like the nitty gritty, you like the details. Well, really, you really want to get this book. Of course, I'm selling it to you, so that's why I'm advertising it. But I do honestly think that it will answer a lot of the questions that you have. It certainly goes through parallelism in these three forms, but then it goes into greater detail, a lot greater detail than what I've just spoken about. And it gives you a lot of exercises as well, demonstrating where you can find, every page, where you can find this parallel structure in literature. And it is on every page of any great writer anyway. So do have a think about this. Do try to listen out for it when you're listening to people speaking, because you'll notice that when people use it, it sounds great. Okay, so if you have any questions about parallel structure, Well, don't put them on YouTube because I'm going to delete this video in a second on YouTube or make it private, and that means no comments are saved. So if you do have comments, you'll have to go to one of the social media channels that I still use, and there aren't many of those left. LinkedIn, vk.com, somewhere like that you'll be able to make a comment. And I'll perhaps think about putting up a comments board on my website, because that's where I want you to go. I want you to go to the website if you're interested in any new free live English lessons, because I'm going to keep making them, but I'm going to put them right on Skype lessons, and that's where you're going to get all your exercises in the future. Okay, so thanks everybody for watching. I appreciate it. If anyone's interested in a vocabulary book, I've got visual phrasal verbs as well. So please have a look at that. I will still be making some science videos for YouTube. So if you are on YouTube, do look out for those. And I'll try to entertain you in whatever way I can with science. But for English, for serious grammar, please come to Skype lessons. Thanks for watching.